on JG9 News, we have a lot of new videos out, including the Saints' bizarre justification for keeping on Dennis Allen as their head coach, the Cowboys deciding to bring back Mike McCarthy for another season, and the news that Reba McEntire is doing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. Make sure to check the link in the description to find out more, and subscribe now to JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. Trash talk. A time-honored tradition where someone on one team decides to talk smack about someone on the other team and criticize their skills and their abilities. Instead of complimenting them and giving them no bulletin board material whatsoever to work with, they decide to go the complete opposite route by giving them all the bulletin board material and motivation in the world and letting them know to their face and to the press just how much they stink. I've talked so many times about trash talk on this channel before, and times where it went horribly wrong, because these athletes forgot the number one rule, which is that you actually have to back up what you say on the field, and you have to play a big game if you're going to talk a big game. To learn more about one particular instance of it happening with Jaguars running back Fred Taylor prior to a game in 2000 against the New York Giants, click the card in the upper right corner. To learn more about another instance of it happening with the San Diego Chargers deciding to trash talk Jerry Rice of all people prior to Super Bowl 29, which, shocker, was a glorious disaster, click the card in the upper right corner. There are so many examples that I'd be here all day if I listed all of them. But with the divisional round taking place this weekend, if you're watching as of the time this video drops, it feels like it's time to talk about one of the dumbest instances of this happening in this particular round of the playoffs. Because I want you to imagine a receiver trash-talking a secondary by talking about how bad they are, even though said secondary is arguably the best in football. And I want you to imagine how that could have possibly gone for both him and his team. Because this player that you've been watching this whole time is none other than Washington wide receiver Michael Westbrook. And prior to the 1999 divisional round game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he said something really stupid that absolutely was used as fuel to the fire, and was absolutely used as motivation, and absolutely deserves to be remembered nearly a quarter century later for how insane it was, and for how much it didn't work out. Because this is the story behind the dumbest trash talk, and one of the dumbest moments in the history of the NFC Divisional round. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and what went down, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, as well as how good not just the player in question was, but how good the opposition was that he was going up against. It's January 15th, 2000. It's the divisional round of the playoffs, and we're down at Raymond James Stadium for this NFC battle between Tampa Bay and Washington. The stakes for this one are simple. The winner advances to the NFC Championship, one step closer to the Super Bowl, which for Tampa would be their first conference championship appearance in 20 years, and for Washington would be their first conference championship appearance in nearly a decade, while the loser of this game is eliminated from the playoffs, with their season ending just shy of football's biggest stage. In what was a very weak year in the NFC, with only 4 teams in the conference even so much as having a winning record, and the entire conference basically hovering around mediocrity, these two teams are some of the best in the conference, and are worthy of being here. And a big reason why Washington is in this spot is because of this man right here, star receiver Michael Westbrook. Obviously, the best offense in football during the 1999 season was the St. Louis Rams with the greatest show on turf, as they obliterated the field. But the number 2 offense was Washington, who finished the season with 443 points scored, or nearly 28 points per game. And there were many reasons for their strong offense, from the great play of quarterback Brad Johnson, who would make the Pro Bowl and would eventually win a Super Bowl with the opponent of this game in Tampa Bay, to the strong running of Stephen Davis, who had over 1,400 yards rushing and led the league with 17 rushing touchdowns. But one of the biggest pieces, by far, was the man that you've been watching, wide receiver Michael Westbrook. After Washington drafted him in the first round of the 1995 NFL Draft with the 4th overall pick, he wasn't anything more than a middling wideout. Over the first 4 seasons, he never had anything to write home about, as he averaged about 36 catches, 580 yards, and 3 touchdowns a season. He was fine, but he wasn't a top 5 pick by any means. Not even close. In 1999, though, everything changed. Because in 1999, Michael Westbrook was one of the best and most consistent wideouts in football, finishing the season with 65 receptions for 1,191 yards and 9 touchdowns, all of which were career highs. In terms of players in 1999 to have at least 9 touchdowns and over 1,100 yards receiving, there were only 6. It was Chris Carter with Minnesota, Marvin Harrison with Indianapolis, Isaac Bruce with St. Louis, Randy Moss with Minnesota, Marcus Robinson with Chicago, and none other than Michael Westbrook. That's a group of 6, of which 4 of the guys are currently in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, so it's safe to say that's pretty good company to be in. 5 times on the season, he crossed the 100-yard mark, including 2 critical touchdowns in a game against the Carolina Panthers back in Week 4, where with Washington trailing 24-7, Westbrook scored back-to-back touchdowns to cut into the deficit and eventually give Washington the win, which helped turn their season around. And perhaps most impressive about Westbrook during this 1999 season of his was his consistency in terms of getting open and being able to get the football. Of the 16 games that he played, he had a catch in all 16 of them, and had at least 3 catches and 25 yards in 14 of them. For some perspective, Westbrook was one of just 15 receivers in football to do that. Randy Moss, Isaac Bruce, Amani Toomer, Antonio Freeman, Jerry Rice, Torrey Holt, all great players, but none of those guys did that in 1999. Michael Westbrook did. Without Westbrook, Washington does not win its first NFC East title since 1991, does not advance to the playoffs for the first time since 1992, and does not find themselves in this spot. But now, Westbrook was about to face his biggest challenge yet on paper, because the opponent for this game was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who got here not because of their offense, but rather because of this unit right here, their defense, and in particular, their secondary. The Bucs got a first-round bye despite having an offense that scored under 17 points a game, finishing 27th in the league out of 31 teams. None of the 4 teams that finished below Tampa offensively ended the season with a winning record or made the playoffs. And combined, the 4 teams ended with a record of 19-45. Tampa, on the other hand, was good enough to get the number 2 seed, and it's because they had a defense that was impossible to beat. This was a defense that was 3rd in the league and allowed fewer passing touchdowns than any team in football, and allowed the second fewest passing yards of any team in football, with the only defense better in that regard being the Buffalo Bills. It was also a defense full of ball hawks. Just ask Seattle Seahawks quarterback John Kitna, who threw 5 interceptions against the Bucs defense. He'll let you know. Donnie Abraham had 7 interceptions for the Bucs, leading the NFL in that category, and aside from him, you had 2 future Hall of Famers playing great football in John Lynch and Ronde Barber. Very few, if any, receivers had success against this Bucs defense. The Bucs had a bye week in Week 6, and after the bye, outside of Johnny Morton in Week 14, not a single wideout had 100 or more yards against the Bucs. Bottom line, this defense was tough to throw on, and it was going to be a challenge for Michael Westbrook. Westbrook was a great receiver at this point, but he was going up against his toughest defense yet. So you would think that this man right here, Michael Westbrook, in the build-up to the game, would be cognizant of that fact. You would think that he would either not say anything, or would talk about how good Tampa's defense is, and how much of a challenge it might be to play them. But as we all know, wide receivers in that era weren't exactly known for speaking softly. Because in Westbrook's eyes, the Buccaneers secondary was nothing special. It was just average. In fact, it might have been below average, because the only reason they looked good was because the defensive line was creating pressure. It's like if you put me at cornerback and on the defensive line, my team consists of Reggie White, Bruce Smith, Joe Green, and Aaron Donald. Of course I'm going to look good at defending the deep ball no matter who I'm going up against, even though I stink, because the quarterback won't have any time to throw it deep whatsoever. Said Westbrook, we have to block those guys, because obviously, their secondary to me is average. The defensive line makes them look good. The blasphemy in that statement, considering the fact that they had the league leader in interceptions, John Lynch, and Ronde Barber starting, with half of the secondary being Hall of Famers, is incredible. But as if Tampa needed any motivation to make it to the conference championship for the first time in 2 decades, Westbrook just gave it to them. This secondary right here, the Buccaneers secondary, was nothing to write home about. Their secondary was just average. And safety John Lynch even admitted to the fact that Westbrook's comments were used as fuel. It's not as though Westbrook was shouting into the void. When the coaching staff heard those comments, they made sure to bring it up in team meetings throughout the week. Said Lynch on this, "I think his track record speaks for itself. We'll do our talking on the field. That's all I've got to say." They do seem confident, and that's not the only thing that comes out of there. Usually when you're talking a lot, it means you're a little bit scared. I'll leave it at that. I love the part about the track record, because Westbrook's lifetime stats against the Buccaneers entering this game were a mere 2 catches for 21 yards on 11 targets. So it's not even like a Barry Sanders against the Bucs situation, or a Derrick Henry against the Jaguars situation, where the man just had a team's number, no matter how good or bad they were. Westbrook had not shown anything at any point against this team, Tampa Bay, and their defense, which is what makes these comments all the more hysterical. But with that in mind, the scene was set for this game right here. Michael Westbrook in Washington against Tampa Bay and their completely bang-average secondary that wasn't even that good, even though they had 2 Hall of Famers in their prime roaming back there. Look, Westbrook talked a big game, and it seemed incredibly stupid the moment that he opened his mouth. But if his team won the game, then it would look way better. Just like Lloyd Mumford at Super Bowl VII, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, they did not. Because as you'll be able to tell with these highlights, Washington ended up losing the game by a final score of 14-13. And it's even worse when you realize that Washington's only touchdown of the game came on a 100-yard kickoff return by Brian Mitchell on the first play of the second half. So Washington scored a grand total of 0 touchdowns on offense. Washington had just 157 yards of total offense on the day, and the defensive line absolutely feasted for the Bucs, holding them to just 46 rushing yards on 22 carries, so about 2 yards per carry, and sacking Brad Johnson 4 times, all while Washington went just 3 for 14 on 3rd down, converting about 20% of the time. Tampa erased a 13-0 deficit with 17 minutes left in the contest to pull off the stunning win, in what was another super close and exciting game in a fantastic postseason, and in front of their home fans in the first ever home playoff game at Raymond James Stadium. Alright, so Washington lost the game, which stinks for Westbrook, but maybe it wasn't Westbrook's fault. You're not going to blame Jimmy Smith for being the reason why the Jaguars lost to the Ravens in 2000. You're not going to blame Gabe Davis for being the reason why the Bills lost to the Chiefs in the 2021 Divisional. Maybe Washington lost, but Westbrook had an amazing game and backed up his comments wholeheartedly. Surely, if this was an average secondary, then Westbrook would be able to get open and play as well as he had all season, if not better. So with that being said, I made a highlight video. I made a feature-length film. Now I give to you, for your viewing pleasure, every Michael Westbrook reception in this 1999 Divisional Round game in chronological order. I think this thing's going to win an Academy Award, folks. I hope you guys like it. I made the music for the movie myself, and it took me a while to make and compile all the catches, but I think it's going to be worth the wait. Roll the tape.
First down. This entire field now being played in the shadows as the second quarter gets underway in the second play, and the catch made by Michael Westbrook.
Seriously, 1 catch for 4 yards. That was it. After all of that talk, after all those claims about Tampa having an average secondary that wasn't any good and looked a lot better than they actually were, And after everything he said before the game, Westbrook went out there and racked up 1 catch for 4 yards. For some perspective on how bad that is, here's a bar chart showing the number of catches that Westbrook had in all 18 games that season. So 16 in the regular season and 2 in the playoffs. Shocker, the game against the Buccaneers was his worst total of the season, with just 1 catch. Now, here's a bar chart showing his total yardage in all 18 games. Once again, 16 in the regular season and 2 in the playoffs. See that red bar that's second from the bottom? Yep, that's the game against the Bucs. The only outing worse was a 1-catch, 1-yard performance in Week 11 against the Giants, but at least his team won that game 23-13. There's no excuse here. This was his worst game of the season, and he did it after everything he said. But hang on, because it finds a way to get even worse. I'm not even kidding. Naturally, the Bucs came out after the game with the last laugh and decided to take turns dunking on Westbrook. Cornerback Brian Kelly said on Westbrook, he came out talking, and that's a sign of insecurity on his part. You saw what he did on the field. Safety John Lynch said, I guess he said in the paper that our secondary was average. 1 catch for 4 yards? That's pretty average. I think Lynch was being a bit too kind, because in no universe is 1 catch for 4 yards average. That's downright terrible. So you would think that Westbrook would shut up, credit Tampa, say that he was wrong and that Tampa's secondary was good, and played their tails off. But nope, because Westbrook said after the game that he was still right, saying, we made it tough on ourselves. It wasn't their defense. Wow, way to be a sore loser. So you say that Tampa's secondary isn't that good. The secondary completely shuts you down. And then you say, well, their secondary still isn't that good. Their defense did nothing today. If there was ever a time where the phrase take the L applies, it's right here. Michael Westbrook, dude, just take the L. You talked a big game. You talked your trash. You lost. You got shut down in humiliating fashion. Don't try and double down on what you said. You're only going to make yourself look worse in the process. Because here, Westbrook looks like an idiot, and he came out like a big loser both on and off the field. And what's funny about the game between these two teams behind me right here is that afterwards, Michael Westbrook would never play another playoff game in the NFL. By the end of the 2002 season, he was out of football, while the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as in the team with their bang average secondary of Hall of Famers, would wind up winning the Super Bowl and hoisting the Vince Lombardi trophy. I think it's safe to say who won this battle, and I will give you a hint, it's not Michael Westbrook. As a side note, you might have noticed that this case behind me has 3 teams in it. Tampa Bay, Washington, that's pretty obvious, so the 2 teams that play in the game. But what about Cincinnati? Why is Cincinnati in this case? It has to do with something in our story. If you think you know why, let me know in the comments down below. I will give you a hint. It does not have to do with the 1999 season. In 1999, this man right here, Michael Westbrook, was clearly a very talented receiver. There's no denying that whatsoever. He thrived in that offense. He had a great connection with Brad Johnson. And without him and his abilities on the offensive side of the ball, Washington might not win the division and be one of the final 4 teams standing in the NFC. But as big as his talent was, his mouth was even bigger. Because safe to say, this trash talk did not work out. One of the biggest rules of trash talk, and maybe the golden rule, is that you have to back up what you say. And if you say that Tampa's secondary is not very good, and you follow that up by posting 1 catch for 4 yards and a loss, and then you double down on that afterwards, yeah, you're not going to come out looking good. Because to start out Y2K, Westbrook was having a bunch of people ask why, as he posted 2K minus 1,996 yards. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.